I'll tell you, there were some other pieces of the recipe, but I was just sort of seeing how it was going, and I decided to keep it a little simpler. We could play a couple games in a couple minutes if people want to try some other things related to some other aspects of the posture, but maybe we could take a couple moments here for those who are here with us, if you'd like to talk about your experience or ask any questions that came up.
I have one comment and a question.
Yeah.
The comment was, I did feel by doing that, the whole rotation of the arms automatically happened, and it wasn't something I had to physically do myself.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting. It just pulled right up,
Mm-hmm.
and the arms rotated. The question is, most yoga teachers will tell you to tuck your lower abdomen when you come up. And what I've been doing is I come up and then I tuck a little bit down below. It's low. So when you're talking about, in the exercise, we were pushing our belly out, putting our sit bones up, so everything's kind of hanging, and then you come up. Mm-hmm. Is it still appropriate to do a slight tuck at the pubic area, or is this something that doesn't? Because I've often wondered, how does this relate to Feldenkrais? Why am I bending it this way? Why am I doing that tuck?
If you were in all fours and you were just doing a cat-cow, which is rounding and extending the spine, I just learned in the past couple days which one's the cat and which one's the cow. I'm really proud of myself. So, and here's my question, like, why do you call it a cow? And right. The only thing that I could guess was the udder hanging down. Oh. And so that's my answer to your question of how I would do that movement. Now, I am not a yoga teacher, and there's all kinds of things like bandhas and all of these particular things that I think that I cannot pretend to replace a yoga teacher in this conversation. And I also think I could certainly imagine, if you've heard that from a yoga teacher, I could imagine another yoga teacher might tell you something different, but I don't know, and I certainly don't mean to be an authority on yoga. But what I think is interesting also in your comment was, there was some hints given about the arms, and there was some opportunities to notice the feeling of rotating one way or the other. But, mainly we worked with this movement of taking the sit bones backwards, right? And yet that does something to the spine. Right. And I think whatever that did also just kind of gave you a particular feeling where, and this is what I was saying at the beginning. So again, Trina had to go. If she was still here, she might have an answer for you to that particular question you asked. But there's also a thing where someone telling you the shoulders are supposed to rotate outwards. It might be correct. It might be the correct cue. And yet, if you don't really know how to find that, the problem with it is for the shoulders to do anything, it depends on the shape of the spine. It just depends on the shape of the chest. If I'm rounded and I'm trying to bring my shoulder blades together, forget it. They can't get together. So when I'm here, there's suddenly space for the shoulder blades to come towards each other. So these kinds of things we can definitely talk about, and it's good to talk about them. And yet at the same time, this sort of integrated way that it all works together, in the end, you can only feel it, right? Which is not to say that forget about talking about these things, but like on the day where everything comes together, and we were given 10 cues in class, and somehow they all made sense to us, there's also a moment right afterwards where we completely forget all of the cues, and we're just in the position and breathing, and it feels wonderful, right? And so, there's all kinds of discussion about how to cue things and blah, blah, blah. And there's some people who use certain images, and one thing I have often heard from people in a yoga class is, you know, my teacher says such and such image, and that really works for me. And yet that image doesn't work for someone else. It probably works for the yoga teacher. They feel that thing in their body. But, you know, what I'd like to emphasize as I say all these things, there's been articles written by people in the Feldenkrais community about the kind of the advantages of Feldenkrais over yoga, let's say. Right. I am not interested in joining in with that position at all. I mean, I think yoga is a beautiful practice, and I think, you know, Feldenkrais can be an amazing complement. And this class was a bit of a challenge for me in so much as I'm not a trained yoga person. I'm actually looking into yoga again for myself as a student at this point. But as I said at the beginning, there are so many fascinating puzzles for the body to figure out in a yoga class that it really seems fun to me to apply what we can learn through, you know, this process of sensing and feeling, and then coming up. Because when you lie on the floor and you're asked to take the heel away to straighten the leg, and then you're asked to take the sit bone back to straighten the leg, the only question that really matters, at least to begin with, is which one feels better. Your body tells you the truth about which one feels better. You try to lift the leg in the air, doing it one way, it feels heavier. You try to do it the other way, it feels lighter. There's a truth in that. It might not tell you everything you need to know yet, but there's something there, and then the nervous system is attracted to what's easier. So we can do some of these things, and then other cards kind of fall into place.
Well, this was really helpful. You know, I started yoga and Feldenkrais at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I have learned to modify my yoga from the Feldenkrais. So I'm always aware of, I'm trying to be aware of what I'm doing, what the spine is doing in relation to poses and stuff. And like you said, pulling things. But this was just, this was a beautiful example of how using the Feldenkrais principles of really understanding what the spine is doing, it changes the whole posture completely. And you know, for years, there's been this emphasis in yoga for me, I mean, to me, by multiple teachers, you know, of you physically doing the changes yourself. But what you've just showed today is if you follow the spine and the principles of the Feldenkrais natural movement, you fall into these postures without a problem.
Well, and you know,
having to physically put yourself
right. Well, and what would be interesting, like if you're in a place after class where the downward dog feels really nice to you, you could go into it again, and then you could think of those cues that you've been given, and then you could move away from the cues that you were given. And if you had a lot of clarity, you'd probably instantly feel like, oh, that's why they gave me that cue. Like the cues are probably good for the most part. I know, you know, this yoga teacher is people like better than that one. There's all kinds of, just like the Feldenkrais world, there's trainings and some are short. Well, the Feldenkrais training is 4 years long, but I know that, you know, there's yoga teachers and there's yoga teachers. There's people who've really gone deep. But, you know, it's just another thing that's more of a philosophy kind of thing, maybe. With Feldenkrais is he emphasized, you know, I don't want you to do anything because I told you to do it. I want to provide a context for you to feel what works for you so that you can then become your own teacher. Right. There's still something kind of true about how can a human skeleton get in that position that is, relatively speaking, true for all humans. But like at the beginning, when you lift and you find, oh, I lift this one knee different, like that's all individual. That's your history. And, you know, I think for any movement practice, what Feldenkrais really opens up is the possibility of processing my own history as I, you know, explore the movements, and then discovering, you know, the value, the learning value, the like sensory learning value of the mistakes, as opposed to just like, tell me how to do it correct, and then I'll aim for that, you know, which is what we do in school too. I mean, it's most of our culture is set up that way, so it's a really different thing. But
yeah,
anyway.
I'm finding what's easy for you. That's it. Yeah. What's easy and smoother. That's yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thought of another comment, but me and Linda are just chattering away here. So let's see if anyone else want to jump in.
No, I'm enjoying listening to it. I don't have
Okay.
that.
Okay. Well, how was the lesson for you?
Well, it was interesting, and I mean, I can't do downward dog. I can't bend my toes or my ankles in that way, but just as you say, reaching down for something on the floor, I can get all the way down with no problem. But what I've noticed in recent years is that sometimes I have a problem coming up, that when I come up, things are out of joint and there's a lot of pain and I've got to go sit down or something. But that idea of bending by moving the sacrum, I think, is something that I'm going to experiment with, because I think that may be something of interest. I have leg length differential, so that sort of plays into it, but
I remember, yeah, we talked about that. Well, so that comment about when you begin to reach down, if the head kind of goes like this, well, if we think that the head is supported by the entire length of the spine, and even though, you know, the orientation is going down towards the floor, if there's a lift at the bottom of the spine, that helps to keep the head, actually, you really want to think of the whole spine staying long as you go down. But for most of us, you know, just because we sit in a chair all day and then we get in a car and we drive around in a car, I mean, life tends to promote rounding more than it promotes extension for most of us.
Yeah.
And so yeah, in that moment, and also coming up, because if you come up and you begin to round, then you just have to muscle your way up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so yeah, it could be useful to think in that
yes, that whole concept of keeping the spine straight as you go down, lifting from there, and I will play with that.
Okay, cool, great, thanks.
Thanks.
So Lisa, I had a question. So what do you, of course I wasn't watching at all, but how do you care for your feet and ankles and in a class like that? Do you just kind of just stay on all fours, or you like?
In a yoga class?
No, just in this class. Like when you had said, you said something about your ankles or your feet.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet specifically what
Yeah.
Did you feel like you didn't know how to care for your ankles during the class?
Yeah, so I just asked because I have some students who have, you know, a lot of pain in their feet and their ankles. And that's one of the things that so we've done some things at the wall because that is more accessible.
Are you talking about teaching them downward dog?
Well, it's the first step of tucking your toes underneath.
Oh, okay.
That's very difficult for some people, and it's just not accessible. And that's one note for myself that I'm on a journey to find out.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, of course, the best thing to do in a yoga class is to not do that at all and to come down and do something with Feldenkrais type stuff, which I've done.
The really kind of, I mean, when you say something about the feet, it's like, sure, I know a Feldenkrais lesson for that. Or if you came, you know, if COVID-19 ever goes away and you came to my studio and lay down, like I could help you with your feet. I could touch your feet and I could work with you. But the thing is, and this is what's so interesting about, you know, going through a class like this, and if someone's coming to this class and seeing the recording and they're doing Feldenkrais for the first time, they've done yoga, and if they're still listening to the discussion at this point, you know, it's interesting to think about, like, what kind of change did you get in your posture, but also how long did we spend? on these little details, right? And there is an investment kind of time, and there's an investment of deep listening, you know, that has to happen. So, I mean, sure, we've done classes with the feet and the toes. Do you remember the one where we were sort of giving ourselves our own hands-on thing with each toe? We were turning the toes, and did you come to that class?
Right, yes.
Right? I mean, you could watch. That's actually simple enough. You could, if you go back to the recording and find it, you could probably show your students. But it's a methodical thing, right? I mean,
there is this idea in yoga, which is, I did not have very many instructors that way, because I would go the other direction, at, you know, look toward the outside and the posture instead of working with your particular, the way you're constructed, and injuries and all, taking in account of how to come to the pose with strength and flexibility that serves you, instead of, this is the pose. Now this, the sit bones going up and back has been such a great, like, one of my first yoga teachers had a way for me going always into my flexibility in the back and finding the strength of the spine in more of a neutral was a huge aha, because I did know that you know, your body says, oh, I've got pain in the back. Well, it's because you're always going in your flexibility, Mary, you know, and you know, to bear down and to go the other way and to go up inward and constrict is also something that I have found interesting in downward facing dog, is that it can feel so neutral, like you're coming home, but then that takes finding your down dog. You're neither cat nor cow, but for me, I do have a little bandha tuck of the pelvis always, so that I make sure that I have the length in the lower back. So I do that little, in fact, bending of the knees and the ankles, just to find that length and going back first. But then I try to always, because of the way my body is organized, some people might need to go to downward facing dog and really rear up that rear end and kind of feel like they're going up with an arch. You know what I mean?
I watched some videos, and one of the yoga teachers described it as, you want to be a shameless dog. That was how she described the correct movement. I mean, listen, the thing is, I mean, I just speak from my own personal experience. I often just didn't have enough time in the moment that the cue was given to understand what it meant, and to actually ask my body to do the thing, and for my body to respond the way I was asking it to do. And so I think some people maybe are quicker that way, you know, but, you know, and again, a lot of us in this culture, we like knowing the right answer. We don't necessarily want to go find it ourselves. We're perfectly happy to have someone who has the knowledge to just hand it to us. And, you know, we don't like hanging out a lot in the space of, I'm not sure, is this right? Like, we don't really, and that's the place that you're invited to hang out when you're in a Feldenkrais class. But what can happen is that, you know, on a deeper level than words, your body can actually get an insight, which is different than remembering the right things to do. You know, and I think in the best of both worlds, we can pull from both of those things. But I know about a year ago, I played with a little yoga, and I was following someone who was being very, actually, like, they were pacing things pretty slowly for me. And to me, it was just like, I want more time to feel each one of these things. And the fact that I'm considering, you know, checking out yoga class. I actually did a yoga class yesterday for the first time in a long time. It's just a miniature thing online. But to me, that shows me that I feel a lot safer in my body, that because when I go into a yoga class, it just, relative to the practice that I'm used to, it feels like we're speeding way up. But it's also because I'm going to go into class from the get-go knowing that I don't need to do every pose as it's, you know, and here in Quarantinesville, I mean, I can always hit pause if I want to, right? But to me, you know, there's a whole universe in every one of those poses. And of course, once you know them, to be able to move through all those positions in an hour is also an amazing and wonderful thing for your body to do, right? So again, it's two different approaches. And I think maybe it would be nice if, I mean, on the flip side, see the sort of, the worst version of Feldenkrais is that it's always slow, that there's this idea that there can never be any effort, which is ridiculous because every movement takes effort on some level, right? And that, you know, it's always got to be lying on the floor and all of these things. I mean, the fact is you can take the most strenuous and difficult movement you can imagine and you can still apply Feldenkrais principles, right? So I was in my training a couple weeks ago. We were doing the headstand, you know, but we took a long time to get there, right? It was like a series of classes leading to the headstand. But then at the end, it was like, oh, I can do a headstand, you know? And so it's just interesting. And what I'm hoping is that there's a place in between that can begin to open up a little more. So like everything I'm doing this week, I'm actually kind of auditioning a potential class series here. So if this is like something you liked, as I said, just downward dog, we could have done 5 different classes. We could have done something for the wrists, something for the shoulders. And the thing about a Feldenkrais class is never for the one body part, but of course there are different emphasis, different lessons. But
Well,
all
thank
right.
you. I've got to run to a
Yeah.
yoga class.
Oh, well, all right. Well, you can
Thanks
keep
a lot.
you can keep you know, chewing on what you did.
Yeah,
here.
keep on my downward dog. That's great.
Yeah, if you make more discoveries, let us know. Okay, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you, Seth.